without further ado, let me introduce our team who is joining us on our webinar today. So my name's Gordon. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. I'm joined by Paula, who is our senior trip specialist, and many of you will have spoken with Paula on the phone if you've called in before. And in the background, we've got as well Joel Curry, who is our co-founder and does our technical support and puts all these beautiful webinars together. So our journey today is a virtual one where we're going to look at this wonderful country of Japan, and where we're planning to go in May of 2023. I just wanted to look back, share with you a couple of images from our last trip to Japan, which is all the way back actually it says 2020, but it was actually 2019 when we were there. Sorry, no, it wasn't. It was, my goodness, you know, what COVID ruins your memory in terms of what happened when. It was in May of 2019. It was the same time. So it will have been 4 years since we went to Japan. We had a marvelous time. We had a great size group. And the thing that made it fun is that, you know, and that's what I think is particularly special about us is that, you know, everybody has this desire to sort of immerse themselves in what's in the culture and what's going on. And, you know, by putting on the kimonos or the yukatas for the men. And, you know, we did a sushi making course like you can see here. And so everybody gets involved. And we have a great time. We have lots of laughs along the way. This is at a tea ceremony that we did in Kyoto. So a lot of fun is always had by all, and we're anxious to go. And I had a lot of members asking about this program. So let's go into it in detail. And just to give you the overview, how we created this program, we actually are almost following in our footsteps from when we went a couple of years ago. Why? Because I think it covered a great swath of Japan, both the big cities like Tokyo and Kyoto, but we also saw some of the forested, the wonderful nature in the Nagano region, which is to the east and north of Tokyo. So we get really a nice mix, because we often don't realize how much incredible nature that there is in Japan. Okay, great. Thanks, Paula, for that. So as I say, we get a good mix between city and the countryside, which I think makes our experiences very, very special. Let's look at the map of where we're planning to go. So our trip is going to start out in Tokyo. So this is obviously the biggest city, well known to all. We can fly into Narita Airport, or hopefully they're going to resume flights into the Haneda Airport as well, which is closer to the city center. But of course, trans-Pacific flights are still not back to where they were before the pandemic began. So we'll have to see how that evolves over time. But either way, we're going to start with a few days in this massive city. I'll tell you about a little bit more in a second. We're then going to go overland by coach or minibus up into as I say, the Nagano region, up into the Gifa prefecture, visiting places like Suwa, Matsumoto, Takayama. Then we're going to hit a mid-sized city in Japan called Kanazawa, the home of the samurai. We're going to then take our first leg by train down to Kyoto, which is more in the middle of the main island of Japan. From there, we'll do a bullet train day tour all the way down to Hiroshima and back. As well as visiting the magnificent temple of Nara. And then we'll take a bullet train back to Tokyo for our flight, either back home or to one of our extension destinations. So let's go through the program day by day. As I say, we're going to arrive first into this incredibly huge city of Tokyo, where we're going to spend 3 nights in a very central location. And, you know, with Japan, it's like the culture shock, if you want to call it that, begins the moment that you land at the airport, because you'll see it is all of the hustle bustle that you imagined. And if you've traveled in Asia before, in one of the big Asian cities, you'll know exactly what I mean. But the thing that is particularly different about Japan and Tokyo that I find special is that, you know, how they call it, you know, the Switzerland of the Far East, because everything runs Absolutely, perfectly. It's organized. The streets are all clean. It is really a remarkable, remarkable urban experience. You get struck by the sheer density. When you think about our Canadian cities like Toronto, being the biggest one, and you arrive in Japan and the skyscrapers just go as far as you can see in every direction. And so this, dense population that Japan has, of course, has caused them to become one of the most innovative cultures in the world, because you have all these people living in a relatively small space. So there is a correlation between the density, the closeness that everybody lives in this environment, and the innovation that comes up out of it as a result of that. And you see that everything from, they have a tremendous infatuation with vending machines. You'll never see as many vending machines as you do in Japan, and you can buy virtually everything out of a vending machine. So when we arrive into Tokyo, as I say, we'll have some time to stretch, relax. We never like to start too quickly on our trips on the first day, because obviously it's a long journey over from Canada, and we'll have time to sort of wander around on our own. The beautiful thing about Japan as well is that it's completely safe. So you can go out and about and wander around, and even if you get lost, which is possible, and at some level I almost recommend it. I mean, not too lost, but in Japan the people are so friendly and they want to help, even if they don't speak much English on the street. You might not find somebody who's readily able to communicate with you like you would if you were traveling in Europe. Some of the things that we're going to see while we spend our time in Japan, in Tokyo, we're going to obviously be visiting a number of different temples. And of course, Japanese religion is sort of divided by primarily the primary religion being Shinto and alternatively Buddhist, or some hybrid, or a lot of people practice both. And so we get a glimpse into what that world is all about and how it sort of shapes Japanese culture, which is, it's very rigid, as we all know. And this is sort of some of the sideline things we learn along the way from our guides, is about, how they're a very insular society. For a long time, it was very difficult to move to Japan. Even if you moved into Japan, it was very difficult. It's difficult for people to be accepted into modern society. I remember one of our guides from the last trip was a young chap who was born Japanese, but lived most of his life in New York and then returned back. And he said to us in the group how difficult it was, even as a Japanese, ethnic Japanese person, integrating into society was quite a challenge. So as I say, we're going to visit a number of temples. We're going to do some sushi making, particularly at the Tsukiji outer market. This is this very, very famous fish market that, if you follow the news at all, was recently relocated from its historical place in the center of Tokyo to a new location. But it is one of the most famous in the world. And simply roaming around and looking at the array of fish and seafood, you won't believe your eyes. It's quite an amazing experience. And of course, to get involved in some sushi making and so on while we're there is part of the fun and part of understanding with the origins of what has become such a ubiquitous cuisine here, and how to properly eat sushi, because most of us do it wrong, quite frankly. But anyway, I'll save that for the trip. We'll also take a trip outside of Tokyo a little bit, and this is to a little seaside, I want to call it a village, but it's more of a small city called Kamakura. And you can see here that if the weather's really clear, you can actually already see the snow-capped Mount Fuji at this point. And all of a sudden, we learn a little bit what it's like to be out in the countryside around Tokyo. This particular town is famous for a place called Komachi Street. That's where in one of the previous pictures you saw, we all got to, or not all, but those that wished. There's nothing obligatory on any of our trips, but those that wish could don a kimono or a yukata for the gentlemen. And we actually spent part of the day in this town walking around dressed up like this. A lot of laughs, a lot of fun, but again, you get an appreciation for this deep, deep tradition and culture by learning about not just dressing up for fun, but what it meant and what it still means their traditional dress here. All in all, this is a lovely town. I'm hoping we're going to hit up the same Italian restaurant for lunch. I know it sounds funny to say Italian restaurant in Japan, but one of the things that we did on this trip, on this upcoming trip, is we had a lot of Japanese meals the last time. And, it's always fun and great to try different cuisines when we're traveling around the world. But, the feedback that we got was, might be a bit too much. So we're going to be enjoying a little bit of international cuisine along the way, which I'm sure that you will appreciate. So we'll head back for another night in Tokyo before packing up and heading off into the countryside. And on our first day, we're going to be heading out up towards Suwa, and we're going to pass Mount Fuji. And if the weather is good, we will drive up partway up the mountain. We won't have a chance to actually climb the mountain. That's quite an ordeal, but we'll drive up to what's called the fifth station, where we'll be able to have a glimpse and look up to the summit of the mountain. In fact, if the weather's good, we'll be able to see it as we drive up and then past it and on to our destination, Suwa. One of the interesting things as well on this day that we, it was in the itinerary from the last time, and I didn't really think too much about it, but there is an open air museum called Hakone which is at the foothills at the base of Mount Fuji. And it was probably the most incredible sculpture park I've ever seen. And I've seen some pretty amazing ones. Works from, Henry Moore, Picasso, this collection that was just remarkable that none of us expected to see it. And this is one of the little surprises, not so much a surprise now that I'm telling you, but that we get to do along the way that, again, really open your eyes because, while, as I say, it's a very insular culture, at the same time, they do appreciate and adopt and bring in, artwork and bits of culture from other places along the way. So in the evening, we're going to arrive at our first ryokan. We're going to spend the first night when we get to Suwa in a ryokan. And this is part of the experience of Japan, because the ryokan is an ancient form of accommodation. Nowadays, from the outside, they sort of look like regular hotels, but this is where you go in and the hotel room will have the beds on the floor, the mattresses, I should say, on the floor on these tatami mats that are typically made out of rice. The whole ryokan is organized around communal areas. So of course you have all of your guest rooms that you stay in, but the real focus is on community. I mean, these ryokans were the form of accommodation dating back to the 7th century. And so it's still very, very popular among Japanese culture. It's a bit different for us as Westerners coming into this environment. We have our private sphere, but of course, like most places in Japan, you have to take your shoes off at the door, and you really find yourself understanding a little bit the thinking, the mentality, and that's what I found interesting about staying at a ryokan. Part of what these ryokans also offer is the onsen experience. And onsen is a Japanese hot spring. And we'll have onsens at least 2 of our hotels during our stay here in the countryside in Japan. And, the onsen, again, is a very, very respected ritual in Japan. The one thing for Canadians who, if I may say so, tend to be a little on the prudish side, is that you can only enter the onsen if you are buck naked. They have a men's, they have a women's, completely separate, but at the same time, it is a 100% clothing not optional, no clothing allowed type of an experience. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you that because I think it's an important part. Of course, you don't have to go and try it, but I highly recommend it. We will visit Matsumoto after spending a night in Suwa. And I remember this castle because, this looks like the Japanese castle that you've probably seen in National Geographic. And we had a lot of fun here because you've got these local characters dressed up in the samurai. And this is where the part on the journey where we'll start to learn about the history of the samurai, because they weren't just soldiers with big knives cutting everybody up. There was actually a very respected institution in Japanese society. And so here they have these guys dressed as samurai, and they're sharing little bits of information about what it means and what it meant here in Matsumoto, and how the Zen and Buddhist cultures influenced samurai culture. And as we spend the next few days making our way up to Kanazawa, we'll hear more and more about the samurai culture. We're going to continue on, and then we're going to spend 2 nights here in Takayama. So now imagine we are pictured amongst the big, I wouldn't call them mountains, but they're certainly big hills. Imagine the Laurentians in Quebec, or in the hills in the interior of British Columbia. All tons of forests. You drive around, and you would never imagine that you're in Japan, because you're in the middle of wilderness, and it's really quite remarkable. And we arrive into Takayama. This is one of the sake centers of Japan. So we'll get a little bit of insight into how sake is made. We'll taste some different ones. We'll understand why cold sake is actually the appropriate way to drink it, even though we in the West are all familiar with our hot sake. And so again, it's an eye-opening experience. The other thing about this region of Takayama here, particularly the hotel we're staying, is they're famous for their Hida beef. So a lot of us have heard of Kobe beef. These are this beer-fed cows that are raised and, treated like they're at the Four Seasons. And you get this very expensive beef. Well, Hida beef is similar. It's like 1 notch below, if you will, but wow, it is incredible. And once again, we'll be staying at an onsen here that will give us the chance to experience the Japanese hot springs. While we're in this area, we're going to visit Shirakawa-go. This is a village where they have the original gas hoe houses. These houses covered in a thick, it's like a meter thick layer of grass on top. And what's really funny is, in Japan, smoking is still, it's quite a bad habit that they still have across Japan. And of course, in a place like this, because these things would go up in a heartbeat, but to see all the Japanese folks outside that are like kept outside because they have to have their cigarette before they go anywhere near these. Anyway, it's these little moments that we experience of how we observe how people behave compared to how we, look at things and move around and so on. That is what it makes touring Japan particularly special, because, although we're all human beings on the planet, they definitely behave and look at things in a very different way. And so when you visit a place like Shirakawa-go, and you understand a bit of the history and how things were in the rural part of Japan, it's really quite amazing. Also, in this area is where they do the washi, the Japanese paper making. And again, you can imagine you've seen those wonderful Japanese hand-painted murals that they do. And so we'll see the washi, the paper that it actually comes from. From here, we go again back out of the rural landscape, out of the mountains, up to Kanazawa. So now we are on like the north east coast of Japan. And Kanazawa, again, you probably wouldn't have heard of before. This is a medium-sized city, which again offers us a bit of a glimpse into the less touristed part of Japan, because of course everybody goes to Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto and Hiroshima. But up here, we will see other tourists for sure, but we're going to be much more in sort of the middle of the real Japan, if you will. And we are situated here at a very centrally located hotel. Again, an improvement I made from our previous trip. We're going to spend a couple of nights here. They have this botanical garden called Kenrokuin. Kanazawa, though, is really, again, it was shaped by its samurai history. And so part of the time that we spend there is going into Nagamichi. This was a original samurai neighborhood where they used to live. We get a bit of an orientation and understanding, again, about the influence that these people had on Japanese culture back, a few centuries ago. One of the fun little activities, because we like to always do something with our hands whenever we have the chance, is we'll do a little chopstick making exercise. And this was we had tons of laughs because we designed and created our own chopsticks, or the design on the chopsticks with gold leaf and all these other materials. And yeah, it just makes for a lot of fun. And again, when we all appreciate the meticulousness with which Japanese products and so on are made, and when you look at these little details, whether it's chopsticks or whether it's the ceramics or the washi paper, whatever it happens to be, you just get an appreciation of the focus and the mental clarity that the Japanese have. It's really, really remarkable. So from Kanazawa, we'll then continue on to Kyoto. So we'll take our first train ride. We'll make our way out again through the mountains, and it will seem like an endless suburb because this part of Japan on Hokkaido on the main island is largely built up. So you pass through sort of city to the next town to the next city at the same time, interspersed with rice paddies everywhere. It's really quite remarkable. And one point I want to make here is, on our train trips, we send the luggage separately. So this is one of the things that enables us to enjoy the local experience, because I think traveling by train in Japan is a great way to do it. Traveling with your luggage, not so much. So we'll be sending the luggage on separately. In some cases, we actually have to get it ready the evening before so that it can be shipped on to our next stop. But of course, as everything in Japan, everything works perfectly. So after a couple of hours rail journey, we'll end up in Kyoto. And as before, we're going to spend a full 4 nights here. I think it's worth it. This city has so much to offer, both on the modern side, where we'll be staying in sort of the business heart, very close to the railway station. But interspersed around the city are all of these little parks with the shrines and temples, and we're going to see a few of them. We'll have some time at leisure on our first day there. I know the last time we walked up the Kyoto Tower, which is quite we didn't walk up, we took the elevator up the Kyoto Tower, which is quite an experience for our members. And yeah, so we'll spend 4 nights in Kyoto. And on one of the days, we will head down to Nara, which is a little bit to the south of Kyoto. And Nara is famous not just for the deers that you see here. I mean, we're all sort of familiar with deers, but the Nara temple is one of the largest. It used to be the largest wooden building in the world. It is so impressive. Set amongst all of these parks and gardens, you have this amazing wooden structure with this giant Buddha in the middle of it. And, we'll see a bunch of temples, but there's the ones that are particularly awe-inspiring. This is one of them. And again, what makes it kind of fun and why I put this picture with the deer on is because they are part of the, how shall we say, they've been a part of this temple and this shrine and the monastery and so on that goes with it for a long, long time. And they're super friendly. I mean, there'll be tons of visitors there depending on the day of the week and so on and so forth. But the deer are just like part of, they come right up to you. You can even feed them. They sell food there. And so, we have a different relationship, I think, to deer in Canada than they do here. But I found it one of the experiences that our Canadian members really found quite endearing and special. We had quite a lovely day. On this day as well, we're going to head up to the Fujimi Inari shrine. This is the one where you have all of the red gates. You've probably seen it before. You'll know what I mean. It's actually on the front page of our brochure this year. There are literally thousands of them. And so you can walk all through this wonderful Japanese garden with these Inari gates. Really, really amazing. That'll be a very special day for us. From Kyoto as well, we're going to do a day trip to Hiroshima. So this will be our adventure on the bullet train. And the bullet train obviously is one of those things that you think about when you think about traveling to Japan. It was one of the fastest high-speed railways in the world, locally known as the Shinkansen. It goes 250 kilometers an hour. So it really bullets through the landscape. They're building even faster ones now. So we can get all the way down to Hiroshima in about 90 minutes. even though it is something like almost 400 kilometers away, and spend the day visiting this remarkable city that is set in a beautiful location on these inlets from the sea. And we all know what Hiroshima is famous for, and so but the beginning part of our trip, we will actually take a cable car ride and look out over this sort of archipelago and these inland seas and waterways. It's really quite a majestic setting for the city. But of course, we're going to visit the Hiroshima Peace Museum and the shrine, and I won't go into it in depth, but these are one of these places that it's a very sobering moment to visit, because when you really look back and you can feel the energy of the tragic history that unfolded in Hiroshima at the end of World War II. So a very special place, a very special day that I'm sure remains in everybody's memories who was on our trip. We'll have another full day in Kyoto. Part of it we'll go and do some exploring around. We'll look for the so-called geisha district, which is called Gion. And of course, this is another very proud and longstanding tradition in Japan. We will do a special evening with a maiko performance. So the maiko are the Japanese ladies that dress up and practice the geisha profession, if you will. And of course, we as Westerners have a lot of misconceptions about what it means and what it was for, largely stemming from all of the stories that came out of the Korean War and so on, and how the geisha were sort of treated or how they were interacted with. And so again, it's a fascinating day and an evening where we get to spend some time, with a true maiko, a geisha, and learn about her quest and why she decided to join this and become part of it. So anyway, I won't go into it in any more detail. That will effectively be our farewell evening. It'll be a very memorable one at that. And then from there, we'll make our way back to Tokyo, where we'll head off back to Canada, or we're just working on 2 extension programs, and I've racked my brain for quite a while on how to do this, because we visited Korea the last time and on a trip that I think was quite interesting. We're going to be doing it a little bit differently. We don't have the extensions completely finalized now, but I'm curious what our members think about extending for 5 nights in Seoul, South Korea, with another optional 5 nights in Taipei in Taiwan. The reason I'm planning to do it that way is because I think that, really the center of culture and getting to understand these countries and these cities is best done in the capital, in the main city. We could go on an extended tour around the countryside, but I think that you get the best bang for your buck by doing it this way. So that's what we're going to be proposing. If you're interested in joining us, we will have an extension to Seoul, South Korea, and then a further extension to Taipei, Taiwan, 5 nights each. And it'll be a bit more relaxing way than trying to sort of buzz around and see a whole bunch of countries. So that's the plan. If you have any feedback or comments on that, please do let me know. This trip, you'll find the details, of course, in the brochure that will get mailed out to you together with a replay of this webinar. It's going to come in land only at about $68.90 per person based on double, and a bit more. The hotels are what makes a big part of the cost in Japan. So the single supplement is a little bit bigger on that one. That's unfortunately how much I can do about that. Of course, lots of inclusions on this program. We have at least 2 meals a day, in some cases 3. We've allowed for more Western meals on this trip because although we appreciate sampling all the Japanese cuisine, I remember very well from the last time, some of it was a bit too much for some of our members. So we created a nice balance that gives you a chance to sample some of that. And of course, all of the transportation, our guiding, we're hoping to have David, the same guide we had the last time on our trip, and he was truly amazing and made it memorable. So the only thing that, as with all of our trips, that we don't include is our airfare. I'll touch on that in a second, as well as any additional pre or post tours that you're doing. And of course, travel insurance, that's so important in this day and age. Looking at the airfares, the trend right now is that airfares have gone up a little bit, particularly on long haul segments, because not all airline routes to Asia have been reinstated as of this time. We're hoping that in the not too distant future, they will have all the routes up and running, and that will have a stabilizing price on airfares. So this gives you a sense here based on economy class of what you're looking for at airfares to Japan. And yes, perhaps there'll be some questions about our program. And of course, if you don't get them answered now in our Q&A session, you are more than welcome to drop Paula or me a note and we will get back to you. So Paula, do we have any questions? I didn't see any come in the chat box. Is there anything on your end, questions that...
We have a couple that have come in over here. Someone was asking about the weather at this time of year.
I think May is the perfect time to go. So last time we were there, the weather ranged from the low 20s and it got as cool as, I don't think it dropped ever below about 14 or 15 degrees, a bit cooler in the mountains. But it's a perfect time generally. I mean, you can get some rain, it's springtime, but otherwise, weather-wise, it's a great time to go.
Perfect. Another question here was asking with regards to the accessibility for anyone that might have mobility, since we're utilizing, vehicle transfers, but also the trains. Can you touch on that and how active the days are?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, this is a relatively active program. That being said, we definitely had, a couple folks on our last trip who, definitely were a bit slower, let's say, than the rest of the group. So I think that, the more mobile you are, the more that you can obviously enjoy, because there are walking components. We go through some parks and so on, and there are steps up to the temples. So, you definitely need to be somewhat mobile to fully enjoy the trip. But at the same time, particularly if you're traveling with a traveling companion, they can help a little bit. I'd say it's well within reason. There's no hikes or super long walks, anything that you'd be missing out that you wouldn't be able to participate in. It's just that occasionally for those that, aren't interested or able to walk up long flights of stairs, we just arrange for them to meet us, at the beginning and the end of certain trips. So I think it's best for anyone that has a concern about that to speak to you directly or to me and get a sense of what's required.
Fantastic. A couple other questions. Someone was asking with regards to language, how easy is it to communicate? Like how widely spoken is English?
English is not widely spoken. So this is one of the things about Japan, and one of the things why, a lot of people will join a group like ours, because, it is a little bit tricky to navigate. I mean, English signs sometimes accompany Japanese signs with street signs and on the metro system and so on. But the average Japanese does not speak any English, or very little. And so, it just means one has to be a bit more mindful about, where you go. And I do recommend taking a mobile phone and getting a local SIM card so that you can have a translation app handy.
Fantastic. I think we've covered everything at the moment. Nothing else is coming in.
Well, I'm sure that there'll be more questions that you might have, and we're pleased to answer them. So please drop us a note. And we are now accepting bookings. So this is the official launch for the program. I do expect a full group. We'll probably be somewhere for around 16 to 18, which is about the ideal size for this trip. So that's what we're shooting for. So if you are interested, our demand is surging at the moment. If you've been waiting for our team to get back in touch with you. It's probably a good idea to sign on sooner than later. The extension programs, if you give us about 2 weeks, we should have them out, and we'll send them out to anybody that is interested in those. And I see, is there one more question there? Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. Again, there's our contact information. Please join us on next Tuesday, which is going to be our first live away in Sicily, where I just returned from barely 2 weeks ago. So I look forward to sharing with you about our Sicily Part 1 live away that's going to be next March. Join us for that on Tuesday. And Paula has posted the link to that. Paula's posted the link to that in the chat box. Thank you again for joining us. It's great to see you all. And I'm sure I'll see some of you on our webinar on Tuesday about Sicily. And otherwise, take care, be well, and let's hope the weather keeps getting warmer.